Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to take a look at lesson 2-4, dealing with what we call deductive reasoning. And what you're going to see today is some of the conditional statements, converse, inverse, contrapositive, those types of things. You're going to see them used in a different way so that we can draw conclusions, make a valid argument, etc. Okay, so to get us started, let's first discuss what deductive reasoning is. Well, kind of a general definition, and ours is going to be, a little bit more specific, but deductive reasoning uses facts and definitions to make conclusions. Okay, so some of the statements you're going to see, they're going to be stated as fact. Okay, sometimes we'll use some definitions, maybe about some shapes, some figures, some numbers, things like that, to make a valid conclusion. Now, as we go through deductive reasoning, there are two laws that we're going to use. The first of these is the law of detachment. And the law of detachment says this: if P implies Q, so there's your conditional. So if P implies Q is true, and P is true, then Q is also true. All right, so you start out with the conditional, and what you'll notice here with this example, the conditional is here. If it's raining, then you use an umbrella. Okay, so that is the P implies Q. Then what you'll notice is that according to this, it's going to refer to the P part. Well, here's the P part right here, and you'll notice that this is the next statement. All right, and then it says if the P is true, which in this case, yep, it's raining, then Q is also true. So using the law of detachment in this example, if it's raining, then you use an umbrella. Then it says it's raining today. So the conclusion, you will use an umbrella. Okay, and again, that follows this Q part. All right, so the P part, the Q part. So that's the law of detachment. Very quickly, I'll give you some more examples here in a minute. The next one is what we call the law of syllogism. And some books, actually our old geometry book, used to refer to this as the law of transitivity. All right, and the reason that is because it actually follows the transitive property. All right, look at the pattern here. If P implies R and R implies Q, then P implies Q. So it's that cut out the middleman kind of thing. All right, so if we look at this example to kind of illustrate this a little bit. So if you study, then you get good grades. Okay, so that's like the P and the R. Then it says, if you get good grades, so there's the good grades part, so there's the R again. So if you get good grades, then you will make the honor roll. All right, so now using the law of syllogism, if we cut out the part that they have in common, the if you get good grades part, the conclusion would be, if you study, then you make the honor roll. Okay, so if you study, then you make, or you will make, the honor roll. Okay, so that's just a quick example of the law of syllogism. All right, so now I just have several more examples just to kind of illustrate this a little bit more. So here is the first one. It says, use the law of syllogism to determine whether a valid conclusion can be reached from each set of statements. All right, so this one says, and it says use law of syllogism, so we know we're kind of looking for that transitive relationship. It says, if Sally attends the prom, she will go with Mark. Second statement, if Sally goes with Mark, Donna will go with Al. So if we compare this, see that part that they have in common? Will it, that part about Sally going with Mark? So, so that means that the conclusion, the valid conclusion would be, if Sally attends the prom, Donna will go with Al. So using the law of syllogism, that's the conclusion that we can make. All right. Next one, same exact directions. Use the law of syllogism to determine whether a valid conclusion can be reached from each set of statements. Okay. If Mel and his date eat at the steakhouse before prom, they will miss the Grand March. Second statement, the steakhouse stays open till 10 p.m. Well, according to the law of syllogism, there's not really a part that they have in common that we can cut out, is there? Like if it did follow the law of syllogism, then like this part would be restated somehow, something about the Grand March. Okay, so this is an example where no valid conclusion can be reached. All right, so I forget what it says in your book. It may even just ask you to write invalid because it's an invalid argument. It doesn't follow that pattern. All right, so that's an example of one that doesn't work. Next one, here we go. Which law was used to make a conclusion? So law of detachment or law of syllogism. Okay, now I purposely worded these the way that I did so we can kind of play around with this a little bit. So, first statement, if the sum of the squares of two sides of a triangle is equal to the square of the third side, then the triangle is a right triangle. So basically that's the Pythagorean theorem read out in words, isn't it? If the sum of the squares of two sides of a triangle is equal to the square of the third side, then the triangle is a right triangle. Second statement, for triangle XYZ, xy squared plus xz squared equals zx squared. Third statement, triangle XYZ is a right triangle. Well, if you look at the pattern, looks like we have our if-then statement. So if the sum of squares of two sides, etc., then the triangle is a right triangle. Then it restates that first part, and the conclusion is that it's a right triangle. So this is a great example of the law of detachment. Okay, so it follows that law of detachment pattern where it says P implies Q, then P is true, so the conclusion would have something to do with Q. All right, that's that law of detachment. All right, last one. Which law was used to make a conclusion? Okay, so again, law of syllogism, law of detachment. If Ling wants to participate in the wrestling competition, he will have to meet an extra 3 times a week to practice. If Ling adds anything extra to his weekly schedule, he cannot take karate lessons. Okay, so it looks like the part that they have in common would be like putting in extra time or the ability to put in extra time. The conclusion, if Ling wants to participate in the wrestling competition, he cannot take karate lessons. Look at the pattern here. All right, see the part where they have in common? This idea about making extra time or having to spend extra time, that would be the part they have in common. So then the conclusion is the first part of this statement and the second part of that statement. Okay, so this is a great example of the law of syllogism. Okay, because again, with syllogism, we see that transitive pattern. So if P implies R and R implies Q, then P implies Q. All right? So for your assignment today, what I'd like you to do is work on page 102 to 104, numbers 9 through 12 all, 18 through 26 all, and 34 and 35. And we will go over those tomorrow. Have a great day.